What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down why tomorrow is going to be a very, very crazy day, as we have lots of option expirations, not to mention new developments on these charts. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000 or more, you're guaranteed 30 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY in invested cash. This offer ends at the end of March, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets. So looking at SPY, we saw this thing trying to push a little bit higher during the pre-market, but unfortunately SPY was not able to break past resistance, and this thing ended up slowing down. In my video yesterday, I said there's going to be a very big test coming. If we had broken past 595, we'd be looking for a big pump. And if we didn't, we'd be looking for a rejection here as we were at resistance. I was hoping the market would hold up a lot better. And instead of trying to get that break, we ended up slowing down. So now we're going to be watching that 589 to 590 area on SPY. If we can't hold that, if that breaks tomorrow, we have a big gap to fill all the way down to 584. So you want to be very careful heading into the way the market's going to move tomorrow. So I'll talk more about this in a couple of minutes, but I first want to talk about some data first. Just know that on the stock heat map, we saw a very interesting day. We saw stocks like Nvidia, Apple, Google, Meta, Tesla, and many other big tech stocks selling off. The overall market was more flat for the most part. Finance stocks did hold up as we got good earnings, but the indices, ETFs, the majority of stocks were still in the red despite that. And we just saw some sectors kind of like flat. As far as our data goes, most of the data today was quite decent when it comes to initial jobless claims. That's why the market just kind of pumped and then dumped. But going into tomorrow, it's going to be Friday, January 17th, 2025. Before the market opens at 8:30 a.m., we have some housing data, which is quite minor. But then at 9:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the industrial production year over year and month over month. Manufacturing numbers also coming out at 9:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This may cause more volatility in the markets. Besides that, there's nothing else that's too crazy in terms of data that's coming out. One other thing worth mentioning is the fact that in terms of the options chain, okay, we have over 1.5 million of these calls expiring tomorrow, and we have over 3.2 million of these puts expiring. So the majority of positions are in puts with a 2.23 puts to call ratio and 580 being max pain. We'll be watching to see what this leads to, at least moving forward. Now, my concern is the fact that max pain is very low here. I think this will go up as the day progresses, as more options are closed and bought. But the problem I'm seeing is that there's low volume on SPY, and there are a lot of shorts. So will the bears try to come in more aggressive and try to get some of these puts to get in the money? There's a possibility the bears may try to fight back. So we'll see about that just to be safe. Although there are lots of options expiring, doesn't guarantee anything. So we'll be watching some key levels just to be safe. Now, another factor affecting the markets was the earnings that came out. We had Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, TSMC, and a couple of others announced their earnings today. Also for tomorrow, we have very minor earnings, just some banks and such. But for the most part, these earnings were more impactful. So we had Morgan Stanley first off. They saw their profits jump, and we saw very, very strong deal-making revenue, which is good news for them. Profits are up 145% to about $3.71 billion, amounting to $2.22 per share, which is beating the expectations. So good job by them with stronger than expected earnings. The share price was up as a result, and we saw surging profits from them. So good job by Morgan Stanley. By Bank of America, we saw the same thing going on. Their profits have more than doubled. Looking at the numbers, they actually saw about $6.7 billion in profits, and they had good guidance. They actually talked about guidance very briefly. They did a good job with that coming out. They beat on EPS and revenue, and they mentioned the fact that for Q1 of 2025, they will give us more details later, but they did relatively well. And then we had TSMC, which did relatively well as well. Despite the fact that they did well, we still saw Nvidia and many other stocks still sell off, which goes to show how weak they're looking. But I say that because despite the fact that we saw their profits of 57%, and we saw them beat on many different metrics, such as them beating on like revenue, which was up 58%. That's very, very good news for them. They are also expecting their AI-related service and processors to continue to double in revenue for 2025. That's good news for them, as growth is expected to continue with strong AI demand. They did mention that for the first quarter, there could be some offset somewhat of an offset in data because of smartphone seasonality. But besides that, I would say that their first quarter revenue is looking pretty good in terms of their expectations and their guidance. And overall, good job by TSMC with the bullish earnings. So good job. The majority of earnings were bullish so far. Despite that, there's still lots of fear in the markets. The market pushed a bit only to reject so far. So the earnings were not enough to really push the market higher, and the fear still perpetuates. Looking at momentum, we're still at extreme fear. We have not been able to get a big bounce or a big dump. We're still kind of stuck right now, so give this some time to progress. And then on top of this, we're seeing the put to call option ratio at extreme fear. This is continuing to climb as there are a lot more of these sellers stepping in. So more puts are being bought than calls, and that's what's causing the ratio to continue to go up. And then we also have the VIX. It's neutral right now. It's stuck in the middle. We'll have to see what we end up getting with all this data that's coming out. So be a little bit careful with that. Besides that, I didn't see anything else that was too crazy on the news. So be prepared for tomorrow, as there's going to be lots of option expirations. So how would I go about trading this tomorrow? What's the most easy plan? It's actually not that hard. So SPY was very, very choppy today. We saw a lot of sideways price action between 592 and 594. And that's the reason why we didn't really make a crazy move. We did, however, start to sell off a bit more towards the end of the day as SPY failed to hold above this resistance. So heading into tomorrow, if we're bullish, you want to see SPY try to retest 594 and break that. If we get above 595 at the very least, then yes, we're going to be easily going for that 600 target for a short squeeze if we are bullish. If we're bearish, you want to see SPY reject, however, and lose 589 to 590. If that fails us, we could easily start dumping back down to 584. And then once we fill that gap in that 584 area, we'll be watching to see if we get a bounce after that going into like next week. Now, know that next week, Trump is going to be inaugurated, so that may have an effect on the markets. We're not there yet, so there is one more day left. So we'll see if we get some kind of pullback beforehand, and then we'll see if we get some kind of bounce after. We'll be watching for that. So we'll see. As of right now, in all honesty, guys, we had this resistance on SPY. We rejected, hit resistance, rejected, hit resistance, rejected, hit resistance again, rejected, hit resistance. And as of right now, we're rejecting. So it is favoring the downside a little bit more for that 584 target. If we lose 589 to 590's confirmation, that's going to favor the downside move. So please keep that in mind. The QQQ has a very similar setup. We hit resistance, rejected, resistance, rejected, resistance, rejected, resistance, rejected over and over again. It's also looking a little bit weaker than that of SPY. When you look at the daily chart, we have this gap to fill all the way down here around this 508 area. So there is a good chance this is going to be coming down a little bit more. Now, we need confirmation first. So if we end up losing this 511 area, this is where our support is at our 200 EMA, then yes, this could be dumping all the way down towards like 508. And we'll have to see if we bounce off that or not. So just hypothetically, if you're bullish, you want to see a break resistance right here at 517. If we get that break, this will be pushing all the way up towards the 525 plus area. So keep that in mind. If we're bearish, you want to see the QQQ essentially reject off 511. If it fails to hold that, we could be tipping all the way down here to fill the gap very close to the 508 zone. And then we'll see if we get a bounce after that. As of right now, looking at the fact that, like I said, resistance led to many rejections on the QQQ, this is technically favoring downside a little bit more, and it might be dipping a bit to fill that gap first, and we'll see if we get a bounce off that or not. So I'm not saying we're going to crash. I'm just saying we might be dipping a little bit to fill the gap. Then we'll see if we bounce once we do that. So keep that in mind. On the IWM Russell 2000, we have a very similar setup. When you look at the daily time frame, for example, there's a lot of gaps to fill below. If we end up losing, support at 222, we could be dipping to fill this gap at 219. I think this is right before CPI. So right before CPI came out, that's when we had this big gap. So we could be coming down to fill that gap before it tries to bounce again, but we haven't been able to break structure quite yet on the Russells. So what I mean by that is we're hitting this, resistance over here. On the Russell 2000, we're just hitting this resistance, over and over again, and we have not been able to crack past that. So this makes me suspect that this might be coming down to about 222 tomorrow. We need to try to break past 226, by the way, near the 200 EMA to start turning bullish for the 230s. If we can't break 226, this is at risk of hitting 222, then eventually to fill the gap back down to 219. Then we could try to bounce off of that. So that's what's looking like the most likely possibility. But look for a little bit more downside to start things off. Looking at ES, just like SPY, we have this giant left shoulder, head and right shoulder. This is looking a little bit weaker for now. Look at the fact that we have this resistance we rejected many, many times. And we're doing the same thing again. So I think this is going to easily visit around 59.40 tomorrow. And we'll have to see if we bounce off that or not. If we don't, we could be dumping all the way down to about the 58.90 to 5900 flat area. So it could be dipping to the lower 5900s, and we'll see if we bounce or not. So watch that very closely as we continue to fall. For NQ is on a bit of a downtrend. We have this resistance right here. We rejected many, many times. We have to see if we could try to break past 21,400 as our resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for 21,600. And if we can't hold above 21,228, we're looking for a dip back down towards 21,100 and all the way down to about 20,800. So I'm looking for those levels down there just to see how we end up reacting. But for now, I do see that risk of us dipping a little bit lower on NQ because we're below our key levels. So this favors a move down here where this imbalance is, taking us down to about 21,000 or below. And then we'll see if we bounce off that or not. But for now, we do favor the downside as a stronger possibility. So please keep that in mind. Now, for Bitcoin, we were trying to bounce here. This is looking so right now. We have a nice cup-like structure. We came down to test our 20 EMA, then we bounced. This is a very, very key liquidity zone. But what's very interesting is we're struggling to really break past this 100,800 area. So if we break past 100,800, I'm looking for 102,000 as my targets. If we can't break past 100,800, this could be dipping closer to about 97,974. So we'll see if we're forming like a cup and handle, but I do see the risk of us tipping back down towards the 97,000 area before we end up seeing some kind of bounce. So be a little bit careful, guys, as there's going to be that risk of us potentially dipping lower back down to the 97,000 zone before we see some kind of bounce. So that's it for crypto and our ETFs and futures. Now I'm just going to focus on the individual tickers. So on Nvidia, unfortunately for Nvidia, we were not able to hold above our key support. We're still showing some weakness, but the thing that's interesting is we're just completely range bound simultaneously. So the weakness came because we got these rejections, but we haven't lost critical support to really start dumping. We love to get bought back up around the 130 area, and we like to reject near 150. So in this case, I think that Nvidia is at support at 133. It's trying to hold here, so it might try to push tomorrow morning, but then this could start dipping closer to about that 130, the lower 130s before it tries to bounce again. So a move like that's looking very probable as we attempt this rebound for our 20 EMA to grab liquidity down here before it continues to just trade sideways like this. And we'll see if we get some kind of bounce or not, but that's all Nvidia is doing. It's just trading sideways. We haven't really lost 130, but we haven't broken 140 yet. So it might pop in and drop closer to the low 130s before it tries to bounce. Please keep that in mind. Tesla is looking very tight right now. So the problem with Tesla is we're rejecting off this resistance, rejection, but then we're holding support down here. We're holding the support. We bounced here. So it's stuck in the middle. It's completely stuck right now. I think tomorrow what Tesla's going to do is it's going to try to rebound a little bit to try to retest 416 to 420. Then I don't know if we're going to break past this resistance. We might come back down closer to like 410 or so. I think we might just consolidate right before Trump's inauguration. But then once Trump is inaugurated and the market opens on Tuesday, so the market's going to be closed on Monday because of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's a very important day. So there won't be trading on Monday. When we open on Tuesday, then we might be looking for Tesla to bounce a little bit because I think that Trump's inauguration is a bit more bullish. But this might pop, drop, and consolidate a bit. Then we'll see if we get some kind of bounce later on. We'll see about that. This is going to be moving on its own. We'll see what happens with Trump's inauguration coming up. Apple, on the other hand, is looking very weak. So we got this little rebound attempt only to get a big rejection after we got some bearish news. As a result of this, we're continuing to fall right here. So it's not looking too good. This still favors downside a little bit more. Look for a rebound attempt in the morning for about this 230 area. Then if we reject again, we could continue to fall back down to like 225. We'll see if we get a bounce off this or not, but I do favor downside a little bit more. So it's still looking a bit more bearish. Look for a 230 and 225 as our potential targets. And we'll see what kind of reaction we get from here. For others out there, we have Netflix. Netflix is on a bit of a downtrend right here, rejecting off our key levels. Unfortunately, Netflix was not able to break past 860. We pushed through it and rejected. So as of right now, it looks like it's going to be dipping a little bit lower towards where this imbalance is. Right down here, this is where the support is around that 825 area. I think we dip closer to that and we'll see if we get a bounce. But just look for a little bit more downside as the most likely possibility for the time being. So please keep that in mind. For MSTR, we have this inverse end shoulders like pattern that was developing quite well. We have a left shoulder here. the head and then the right shoulder, this might attempt to try to get closer to about that 377 area. And it's showing a lot of strength compared to the markets. So I think this could still try to push a little bit higher, all the way back up towards that 370 zone, which is where we have that gap. 370 and 375 are potential targets. So I see potential in this chart. For Celsius, unfortunately, we're very flat right now. I say this because we haven't really made much of a move. This might dip and try to retest 27 flat because we didn't close above our 50 EMA. So it might be a small dip to lower 27s and a bounce after that. We might just continue to trade sideways. So give it some time. Look for a small dip towards 27 and lots of consolidation as time goes on. For super micro, we're trying to hold these lows right here. As you can see, we're holding support over and over and over again. So it's doing a good job. I like the fact that it's trying to hold up, but just know that we're very flat. We're only up 0.42%, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I think it might be testing 31.5 and then may dip back down to 30 and just continue to consolidate right here. So it's not really doing much. On Palantir, we pushed very nicely, but now we're just range bound. We have resistance at 70.69 and support at 68.41. If we lose 68.41, we're looking for a move back down to 66.5. If we break 70.69, we push to about 72. Tomorrow, look for a small push on this to try to test this resistance. And I think it might just consolidate for some time until we get Trump's inauguration. That might be the next catalyst for us to try to break out. Otherwise, we're just going to be trading sideways for some time in this range before it tries to break out. So keep that in mind. Rivian is looking a bit more bullish. We were talking about that yesterday. It's looking a bit more promising. We're going to be seeing if we could hold above 15 or not, but I think 15.5 is coming as our resistance. And we'll see if we reject or not. But look for 15.5 as a potential target, and we'll see what happens after that. For SoFi, SoFi is trying to break out right over here. We're on a bit of a downtrend here, and we're attempting to break out. So we're looking for an attempt to get back up to about 16.5 or to 16.6 is our resistance. And we'll see if we reject off that or not. If we lose 16 flat, we're looking for a dip closer to about 15.5. So I'm favoring the 16.5 area as our potential targets, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get at least after that. So please keep that in mind. I think that's going to be very, very important. For others out there, we also happen to have AMD. AMD's on a bit of a downtrend right here. So look at essentially 121 as our resistance. If we can't break past that, this may continue to fall back down to about 116. A little bit of weakness right here. Might see a small dip before it tries to bounce, but because it's below its EMAs, it's showing some weakness. For ARM, we're showing some weakness. We're going to be looking for this resistance right over here. I think it could be dipping closer to about 145 before it tries to bounce, so keep that in mind. Coin is showing some life and might try to get close to about 285, and we'll see if we get a rejection off that. For now, it's very promising and it has a nice setup to continue this uptrend. But even if it gets a dip, it could continue the uptrend. So it might push like this, come down, and continue to uptrend slowly push like this, for example. That's what it could be doing for now. It might push a bit, then get a small dip. Amazon's looking a little bit weaker. Unfortunately, Amazon got a rejection. I was hoping it would hold its EMAs. It has not so far, so it's showing some weakness. We might be dipping closer to that 218 area before it tries to see some kind of rebound. So please keep that in mind. When you look at the daily chart on Amazon, by the way, we still have this gap over here that's getting filled, and we look kind of weak on the daily with the bearish engulfing candles. So that typically favors downside a little bit more. So we might be dipping a little bit more towards 219 to 218, and we'll see if we bounce or not. Looking at Meta, we could be dipping to about 607 or below before it tries to bounce, so just keep that in mind. For Microsoft, we're going to be looking for 422.5. If that fails us, we're dipping to about 419. We'll see if we bounce or not. It might be a small dip to about 422. We got to hold that, or else this will be dipping to about 419, favoring the downside a bit more, especially as we have that imbalance. So please keep that in mind, guys, as we're seeing weakness on the daily chart. For Google's on a bit of a downtrend. We have this range between 198 to 200 is our resistance and 190 is our support. So we're looking for essentially 193.69. If that fails us, we could be dipping back down to 192. If anything, we're just continuing to go back and forth right here. So we'll have to see if we get a bounce or not. Just know there is going to be a risk of us dipping a little bit lower, so be very, very careful. For GameStop, we're on a bit of a downtrend. We're continuing to fall back down towards 27. We'll see if we get some kind of bounce or not, but overall, we're favoring downside. For AMC, we're favoring upside a little bit more. It's showing some strength. If we could try to hold 3.5, now we're looking for essentially 3.78. For DJT, we're showing weakness. We're kind of flat right now. I think it's going to continue to consolidate in the 40s, and we'll see what happens once we get Trump inaugurated. The VIX looks a little bit like it wants to push up to about 17, but we'll see how it reacts to resistance. This has some potential to push higher, but we'll see depending on how tomorrow goes. The 10 years trying to hold 4.56, very close to our 50 EMA. If this holds, it could try to rebound, which tends to be bearish for the markets. The dollar is just consolidating, not really doing much, so it's not affecting the market too much either. So with that being said, my view for tomorrow is very simple. We're going to be watching our levels just to be safe. Anything could happen because of all the option expirations. But considering the fact that SPY is known for rejecting off this trend line, and as of right now, we did not do a good job at breaking past it, it is favoring downside a little bit more to fill that gap if we lose 589 to 590. So watch that for confirmation. With that being said, guys, I thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll be back tomorrow before market open to give you guys another update. Until then, I just hope the best for everyone out there. Please take care, guys, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. The market is still showing a lot of potential for the more medium term, despite the short term downside we're seeing. So be prepared, guys, and make sure you guys are prepared for anything. Thank you for listening, and peace out.